Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Chronically podcast. I'm your host, Aimee Esther, and in today's episode, we're talking about grace when you live chronically ill. And I have a very special guest, Elise, here to talk about some of the things she has learned about grace. So let's get started. If you live chronically ill like me and are looking for more purpose, control, and joy in your life, then you are in the right place. This is the podcast that challenges your thinking around chronic illness so you can live the most amazing life despite extra challenges. Are you ready? Let's go. All right. So welcome to the podcast. Would you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Elise, and I am a wedding photographer, and I live in Northern California in wine country, so the Sonoma County area. I am 37. I have two kids, ages 14 and 11. I was married for 10 years, and I'm not now. And I think that's kind of my overall kind of current life at the moment.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you have your own business, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I went from being told when I was in college that photography would never pay the bills, and it was just keep it as a hobby and you'll be okay. And then finally it was like, gotta do it. I was working the regular desk jobs and was fine, but it was like, I know that I can do this. And so I started building my business. And then now this is my 12th year doing weddings. And I would say probably my 5th year as to where I can provide for our whole family on my own.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. So tell me about your chronic illnesses and then also how you work and do all that with your chronic illnesses as well.
Yeah. So in 2020, I had, we'll just say I'm very good at ignoring my own health issues. Like if I have a really bad headache, I'm like, I can do this. I don't need Advil. I can push through. I might be dying, but it's okay. And then, so in 2020, I had been noticing some signs probably for a couple years prior that something was wrong, but it's like, I probably just didn't eat enough breakfast, or maybe I'm dehydrated, and just chalk it up to all sorts of other things. And so I ended up passing out. And so then it was like, well, I should probably go to the doctor. And so then I got some blood work done, got told that, oh, you just have low iron. So start taking iron pills that are going to take like a year to actually build your iron up because it was so low. But, and then I was like, all right, waited months. I felt so terrible. And just the minute I would get up in the morning, I was so dizzy and could barely, there were times that it was like, I cannot get off the toilet without hanging on to somebody. So being, living basically single mom with my kids, it was not ideal. But so it took probably a year of so many doctor's appointments, me having to fight for myself, which I don't like doing, and don't like doctors because so many of them just said, oh, you've had a rough life. It's anxiety. Like, just go home and meditate. And then finally I was seeing a cardiologist who was telling me like, well, you might have all these problems. However, it's just anxiety. At the end of the day, it's just anxiety. And I was like, I need another doctor. And so I switched, and he ran a few tests and finally told me that he's like, no, it's not anxiety. Like, you've got all this stuff going on. And so he diagnosed me with something called neurocardiogenic syncope, which is in the sister and umbrella of POTS. And so basically my autonomic nervous system does not support my major organs like everybody else's. It doesn't really tell it what to do. So the standing, a normal person's heart is like, okay, now we pump the blood and get the blood back up to your brain. Whereas mine, it's like just sinking down to the legs, draining from the head. Why I'd been dizzy. My heart rate was up in the 200s on like a normal day. And yeah, I was just so weak, and I couldn't, it was actually strangely very, very grateful for the pandemic because I could not drive anywhere. I normally take my kids to and from school, then to jobs, obviously grocery store and all the other parts of life that you have to drive to get things. And I could not drive. So occasionally my mom would drop off some groceries for us. And there was a time or two that I would be like, I think I'm okay, I'm going to drive. And then we get like 5 minutes and I'm pulled over on the side of the road and I'm like, I can't drive. What am I doing? So yeah, it was, I then got started on some medication, and took a while for it to actually not make things worse. It took a couple weeks, but then now I rely on it heavily. And I would say a good 50 to 75%, it does the trick. And even though I still have symptoms of everything, it's way better than it was. So.
Oh, that's good. I mean, not good that it's not gone, but at least we're making progress. That's what I always have to tell myself. Like we're on the road. We're not there yet, but we're making it there. Exactly. So that, I mean, you have a lot going on physically with your health. And then also you have a lot going on in your life and running a business and taking care of your kids and all the things that you do. And it seems like you are a very productive person from what it seems like you have a lot that you need to do. So how do you still give yourself grace for being chronically ill, for the days where you're not able to do as much as you would like to?
This is, I not maybe like the largest thing I struggle with, but one of the biggest things. I tend to think that if I didn't get all these things done in a day, that was not a productive day.
Yeah.
And if I, I'm doing a bunch of housework and I'm like, I gotta lay down. I'm sure that, just being flat is helpful.
Yeah.
And just kind of getting like the blood back into where it needs to go. And so that's something that I still very much struggle with, thinking that, okay, I shouldn't have to lay down. I should be able to go further, or whether it's like one of our things, we go on hikes, and if it's hiking up a hill, I shouldn't have to sit down and put my feet up like an idiot, like on the one that people are passing that's like, oh, you look young enough, why are you like heaved over? And so it's very hard for me to not compare myself to people that don't have any issues, and just think that if I work harder, then maybe I'll get to the same level as them, health wise, or thinking that there is something that it's like, oh, if only I can do XYZ, then I'll be better, or whatever it is. But it's definitely something that I struggle with a lot. I'm working on that.
Yeah.
As far as giving myself a little leeway and grace, but yeah.
So what does grace mean to you?
I know the meaning of it. and I know it's like, I know what I mean for my kids' sake, that it's like, okay, you are either struggling here and I'm going to give you a break, or you did something wrong and you deserve a punishment, but I'm going to give you a break. And so for me, it's hard to think about that in terms of myself, as far as like, oh, I'm going to give myself a break, or yeah, it's, which you would think that if I'm treating my kids a certain way and giving them grace in certain areas, that I could do it for myself, but it's definitely hard to not beat myself up when I need the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like a lot of times for me, I'm like, oh, I need to rest, but I have all this judgment on myself while I'm resting. Right. And I think grace is like doing it without the judgment. Like, it's okay if I don't do anything today and I lay on the couch all day. And I think that's hard to accept in a world that is so like productive. Like your value comes from how much you do. It's like, no, it really doesn't. And giving yourself grace that you're human and that you are a chronically ill human who has physical symptoms that make it hard to deal with day-to-day life. And I think it's hard to do that without judgment. But when we allow ourselves to take a break when we need it without the judgment piece, it feels so much better. It's like, what's the point of not doing anything? You're just going to sit and think about it the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So what does giving yourself grace look like in your day-to-day life? Like if you were to be perfect about grace, what would that look like practically?
So over probably maybe just the last 6 months, I have kind of like battled with that and I'm like, it's just me. No one else is telling me you are being lazy or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's all me telling myself that. And so I just thinking like, why, if nobody else, like not one single person has like come up to me and been like, you're so lazy, like, get up, get stuff done. And so I'm like, why is that what is in my mind for myself? And so I realized that there has been many times that I have thought the same about other people. And so that it was just kind of a weird realization of, oh, I'm thinking about that myself, because that's how I have thought about people in general, that it's like, if you, I think just not understanding before anything happened to me, it was like very much like I had no understanding of certain illnesses that you can't see. That it's like, I go in the grocery store, not one single person would suspect that something's wrong with me. It's like, right. I look pretty normal. And I think I would do the same thing, as in like, you look fine, you must be fine, get up and get moving. And so now for myself, realizing that it's like, I always going to be a work in progress, but just working to give myself, for one, a different self-talk, that you're not lazy. You've gotten a lot done today and now you're wiped out. So it's okay. And then also realizing for other people that when I see someone else that I think like, oh, you could do more. Why are you sitting down? Whatever it is that I don't know. And to take the judgment away, not only from other people, but for myself, and just kind of change my critical self-talk that comes very naturally, and work on pushing it more towards positivity in any way that I can.
Yeah. And I think we are the hardest on ourselves, right? Like, especially if it's something, it's like, okay, we see it in other people, but then when it's us, we're even harder on ourselves. And I think it's also like allowing other people to not get it. Like I have a lot of my clients will say like, oh, but I just want my spouse or my friend or my random person I see to understand what I'm going through. And it's like, of course they wouldn't understand. They've never been through it. If you're not chronically ill, you don't know what it's like to be chronically ill, even if someone tries to explain it to you, right? And I think it's also allowing other people, like if they do judge you, that's on them, right? That's not on you. And our job is, can we not judge ourselves and try not to judge other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think it's important when you live chronically ill to give yourself grace when you need to, take care of yourself in whatever way that is, whether it's laying down, or some people like are full on bedridden, some people just need to take things slower. Why is that important?
I mean, for myself, realizing also that many times if I'm like, I can push myself, and I can push myself to the point where I know like I will pass out very soon. Whether it's physically to be like, I'm gonna exert myself to the point where I am so dizzy. My legs are just noodles, and I know like if I don't sit down, I'm gonna pass out. Like I know that I can push myself to that point, but then I have realized later on it's gonna bite me in the butt. I'm gonna feel terrible for the rest of the day, if not the next day. And I'm still learning certain triggers and what makes me feel like extra bad. There's times that I'll go through a period of a couple months where even on my medication, I'm like, I feel awful and I don't know why. I didn't change anything. I'm like, I don't know if it's just the weather and it's screwing with me. Like, I don't know why, but I'm just learning the fact of, okay, if you push yourself too hard one day, you are going to feel it so much the next day. And it's not going to help anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's even harder on the times where like we have no idea why we're flaring, or this whatever thing we thought we had figured out is coming back, or something new is coming. Like when we don't know what's going on or why it's there, or we're doing everything quote right and we're still feeling awful. Like I think that is where it's even more important to give yourself grace that like we don't know what's going on, but we need to take care of ourselves in whatever way that means for you. And then I also think there's the other side of the coin, which is we give ourselves so much grace that we don't hold ourselves accountable for things, right? Like, oh, I can never do anything. I can't work at all, or I can't, like, I think a lot of times I think that like, I just can't do anything. I just want to quit all the things that I'm doing because it's too much and it's too hard. But then there's this part of us as humans that I think crave like that productivity. We want to feel purpose in the world, and we want to be productive. We want to do things. And I think that balance is tricky. So how do you balance keeping yourself accountable for what you can do and not overdoing resting, or overdoing giving yourself saying, well, I'm sick, so I can't do all this. But how do we balance that accountability and grace?
I'm definitely still working on it.
Yeah, it's so hard.
There's definitely days where I'm like, I know that a certain amount of exercise makes me feel better for the rest of the day. So there's times that if I'm in a good routine and it's like, okay, I know that, this 45-minute workout at the gym, once I drop the kids off, I get this in, and then I might be a little dizzy at the gym, but then the rest of the day I'm like, oh, feeling good. And then there's days where it hurts, like it physically hurts to be on the treadmill, even if I'm just walking. And it's like, my legs feel like someone is just siphoning them off and I don't want to be there. And I'm like, nobody wants to be in pain. And so there's times that it's like, I know this is good for me. Like I can do it. But then there's also the days where it's like, I don't have to do this. It hurts. Like it shouldn't have to hurt because, I wish I was just regular old me that I used to be. And so definitely still working on the balance of just kind of like throwing my hands in the air and being like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like it's all going to be the same anyway, versus no, you can do this. Whether it's like you take it easy that day versus, going hard. But for me, it's like, you gotta just do something, get up and, and I do see the benefits of, I think for me, one of the bigger things is just like some sort of daily exercise activity. And it's not some big, giant running a bunch of miles, because that would kill me. But it's just like, gotta get up and do something. But yeah, it's very easy to kind of tell myself that like, no, that's gonna hurt, so you don't want to do that.
Right.
But yeah, a weird balance, but I'm working on it all the time. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I like to live, I call it the 5-minute rule. Live by the 5-minute rule. And like whatever it is, if I told myself I was going to do something, then I'm like, I feel terrible, this is awful. I'm like, I'm just going to do it for 5 minutes. And if I still feel terrible, I can stop. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on a podcast episode. And I'm just like, I just have to sit and film for 5 minutes and then I can stop. And almost every time I end up like just like getting in the zone, or I like end up feeling better, like mentally, because I've got up and done something. But then other times I'm like, no, this makes me feel way worse. And so I'm going to go back and lay down. But giving myself that 5 minutes to like figure out, is this my brain trying to tell me you can't do this? Or is this my body telling me you can't do this? Because if I go over my brain is lazy and it doesn't want to do anything, right? But then my body hurts. And so it's easy to fall back on that and almost give myself too much, like, oh, but you're sick. Oh, you have these illnesses, so you shouldn't have to do that. And I think it is important to balance that, because it feels good too to do productive things and to get stuff done. And I think balance can come in different ways. Like it could be 50% of the day you're resting, 50% you're working, right? But most of the time for me, it's like I kind of overdid it yesterday, so today I'm gonna rest extra. And like that's my balance, is like I'm resting more today because I did a little too much yesterday. Or like for me, I feel like it's never like this perfectly balanced scale. I'm just like, oh, I'm a little off this way, so I need to rest a little more. Oh, I'm a little off, been resting so much, I should push myself a little bit. And every day is going to be different, and that's okay too. And I think we need to be very adaptable when we live chronically ill, because we don't know what's going to happen or how we're going to feel. And I think that can be really, really hard to find. But for me, it's like remembering, like, I'm just trying to figure out how to find balance. It's never going to be perfect. We're just going to try again.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you do on the bad days? How do you bounce back after you've had a bad day physically? Like, how do you bounce back into work and kids and all the things you have going on when you have those rough days?
So you kind of touched on part of it, that there are days that I am already having a bad day. And I know that I'm like, I have like 4 photo sessions scheduled this week. I don't want to do any of them.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, do I try and cancel or reschedule for later? And, a lot of times I'm booked until the end of the year. And then we book a lot of times for the next year, and I don't have all, even though it's my business and I technically can choose my schedule, there's a lot of times that you really can't. And so, there's been many times that it's like, I don't want to go to the session. I don't feel good. I want to just be home and, know that I don't have to be on for anybody else. And so, I don't have like a scale per se, unless I'm at the point where I am so dizzy I can't drive. There's also been many times that my mom has taken me to sessions. Yeah. And so she's been very supportive. And I'll be like, you know what? They're about an hour long. I can get through an hour. And I find many times that once I'm there, once I'm interacting with the people, talking with them, you said like getting in the zone. It's like, I definitely have a photography zone, and it has become, definitely a big distraction, where it's like the dizziness is still there, the lightheadedness, like the whoop, I thought I was gonna trip on a rock, but there was land there. I'm like, that's one of the bigger things that I get like off kilter, and I'm
Get
like,
your best shots when you're falling over.
a little more stumbly than I would like to be, but then a lot of times it's like the session is over and I was like, it went very well. I might have been a little more like aloof to things than I normally would have been, just because the brain fog comes in sometimes when there's not as very much blood up there. But so that's one thing, is like telling myself, like, you can do it. You're gonna show up. You can do almost, you say you can do almost anything for 5 minutes. I'm like, I can do almost anything for an hour. I cannot run for an hour. Don't ask me to run. But I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that I can do. And sessions have been one of those things that it's like, I can do this for an hour and talk to people. And it's become almost like therapeutic and a great distraction from sometimes how I am feeling on the bad days. And so besides for that, if I don't have things scheduled or I have to be with clients and I am having a bad day, then I go two ways. Sometimes I just let it be, and it's like, you know what, you feel like crap, and it's okay if you need to lay down. It's okay if you need to holler for your kids, like, can you bring me some water? I need this. And they've gotten very used to dealing with me. Or having to pull over in the car. Many times they've been very patient with me. And so I think that's kind of the big thing, is just letting it be. And, it's like, I'm not losing money over this. If that was the case, I would be kicking myself a lot more. But so yeah, I think that's kind of just, I'm definitely still working on it, but just kind of like noticing, like, when it's a bad day, it's a bad day, and just let it go.
With every interview I've done, it seems like everybody has kind of their thing, their hobby, their thing that brings them joy. And I feel like when we are able to do something that brings us joy, it can kind of distract us from the symptoms that we're feeling sometimes. And not always, but like a lot of the times, for me, it's like creating videos and podcasts. It's like, I would expect that to make me feel worse. And every time I think it's going to, and then I start and I'm like, wow, this actually made me feel better, just because like mentally I feel better for doing it and having something that brings me joy and is fun to me. So is there any last things or last advice you would like to share with us?
I don't know that it's not from my own head. It was more so, I think it was a few months ago, I was definitely going through a very rough health patch. And I was actually at risk for getting my driver's license taken away. Being considered unfit to drive, and just stressed. It just seemed like there was one thing after another that was coming at me. And just the stress of it, and stress obviously doesn't help. And so I believe it was in that time that I was just searching up whether it was other people with dysautonomia or POTS or neurocardiogenic syncope. And so I had come across you, and I think it was the first episode or YouTube video that I watched from you about how your mind plays into it all and how you get to choose your thoughts about everything. And I was like, honestly mind blown, and just like, not just for health, but for everything. And that's something that just hit me so hard, that was like, oh my gosh, like I actually can choose how I want to think about this, and I can choose how I feel about myself. And I think such a big thing was like, I wanted people to understand like why, everything was happening to me, or I just wanted people to understand how bad I felt, or whatever it was. And just, I can't, because they've never felt it and they never will. And so just the whole mentality side of dealing with things was just like, I still got to work on it. And
me too.
Very aware. I was like, just hearing that was like, it's not, I just loved it so much, because it's not something that was so specific to any one chronic illness, as far as like, oh, if you do 20 jumping jacks a day, or if you drink green juice every day, you'll be okay. It wasn't something that's like, oh, do this and you'll feel better. It was like, this is your mind, you get to control it. And so that was just like, mind blown, like, oh my gosh, I can do this. So.
Yeah. And I think so often, like, we think that our circumstances are what are controlling us. And I, like, seriously, I'm still working on this all day, every day, which is why I have the podcast and everything. It is a constant effort, but like realizing that like you do get to choose like the life you live, really, no matter what happens to you. And I think it's so empowering. And sometimes I say things and people hate it, and they're like, I don't want to hear that, because I think the truth is hard, and it is hard to hear. But it's also so empowering if you accept it. And I think it's important to know that we can control our own thoughts and feelings, and nothing is forcing us to do or think anything. And it's a constant battle. Some days I'm really good at it, and some days I really suck at it. But just that reminder every day that like, okay, I mean, you got this. Just try again. Let's focus on what we can control, not what we can't control. And I think that is, for me, the most helpful. And I think so much on the internet is about physical health and like, oh, do this, take this supplement, or do this diet, and then you'll be cured. And all that's great. And if it's helpful, it's great. But I just feel like the mental side of it, people aren't talking about it so much. And I think it's almost, for me, more important when I focus on my mental health than even the physical, because if I don't have that in check, my physical is not going to get any better anyway. Right?
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story and the things that you're going through. I'll link your website down below so people can check out your photography. It's amazing. I looked at it earlier today. And thank you for being on the podcast. Hey friend, do you find value in this podcast but want to take it to the next level? Work with me one-on-one or check out Chronically Me, the course and workbook. This course takes the things you are learning on the podcast and helps you apply them directly to your life. This course dives deeper into changing your thinking, teaching you how the brain works and how to maximize your life with chronic illness. I designed this course as a companion to the podcast. The podcast gives specific, real-world examples, and the course helps you put them into action. If you want personalized one-on-one help from me, I got you. I also offer individual coaching programs where we can talk about the problems you are facing. I'll help you manage your brain and find solutions to nearly every problem that you have. We will walk hand in hand on this journey together. Check the show notes or the video description on YouTube for more information on getting extra help from me. Talk to you soon.